I'm currently on the phone with Rick. He's another musician that reached out about the current interview session. So I'm going to go ahead and give him the chance to introduce himself.
Hi, I'm Ric Gordon. I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm a producer, singer-songwriter, and creator.
Excellent. All right. So with these interviews, the intention is kind of, to go back in time a little bit, figure out, how people came in contact with music. So give me some details about how you kind of first encountered music. What about it was important to you and made you want to pursue it?
Okay. Well, I'm probably a bit unconventional with your guess in that right off I'm 70 years old. And I've had an entire career in the business, as it were, and I've got a lot of memories and a lot of milestones along the way. But where it started for me was a record by a guy named Domenico Modugno, uh, Il Blu de Pinto di Blue, also known as Volare. You can go Google it. Ed Sullivan loved it. This was 1958. I was 5 years old, and it was my first record. I loved it, and I loved everything about it. And I knew then I wanted to be a musician.
Awesome. What do you think it was about that record that kind of, really spoke to you and made you want to pursue that?
I don't know, but what's interesting, is I started off on cornet, but then when the Beatles came out and rock started, I changed, and of course my career was that direction. But just in the last couple of years, last 3 years maybe, I've started to play and write that kind of pop music, and so it's interesting that I've sort of come full circle to the music that got me started to begin with, and I'm writing big swing numbers, and it's interesting for an old punk rocker.
Sure, definitely. So let's kind of figure out, how you kind of stepped into it. What was your first step into like learning an instrument? How did you pick up the instrument, and what was your learning tools? Like, how did you train yourself, or did you go through private lessons?
Went through private lessons. I started right then when I was 5 years old on a little cornet, and I was really taken by Louis Armstrong and by that kind of jazz, and so I wanted to, I wanted to pursue the cornet, and my mom and dad, my dad especially, was very into people like Mel Torme, and my mom was a Bobby Soxer, so she was into Frank Sinatra, and they were into Streisand and all those people. So I grew up listening to a lot of really good music, really, solid players and exceptional singers. And my mom had a sister who was a lounge singer and did a few singles for Dory Records in Los Angeles, and so I was just sort of around that, and was just progressed from there. I got pretty good on the cornet by the time I was 7 and 8, and then when I was 10, I heard an import. My dad brought home an import of the Beatles, and that would have been, what was that, December of 1963, and I was gone. I started guitar that April, and I was in a band that next August, and did my first gig at the seventh grade talent show in the spring of 1960. Would have been 1965. 1964, 1965 would have been spring of 65 was the first gig at the talent show. I just can imagine how horrible we must have been.
So
Yeah.
looking back, and it's probably a little ambiguous to look back at it so far from where you are now, but how do you think the skill set was transitioning from the cornet onto the guitar?
I didn't even think about it. I stayed playing the cornet. I played cornet until I got out of high school, and so I always played in the school band and everything. But guitar was what I did, and I turned pro very early. I had wonderful parents, but a very challenging home life, and so I emancipated when I was 14 and got my musician's union card because you couldn't get a union card and turn professional till you were 14. And I turned professional at 14, um, graduated high school a month before I turned 17. And that month before I turned 17, I moved to Greenwich Village and embarked on a very serious music career.
Okay, so let's talk about that. When you kind of first decided to set forth into the music industry as a 14-year-old, what were your steps? Did you look for other bands to play with, or were you more focused on creating your own music?
No, it was always our own music. Yeah, we were, back then, it's real different with musicians now, and I know a lot. I'm still an active record producer, and so I know a lot of people, and it was very different then because the whole focus was on writing hit songs and getting a label deal. It was about publishing, about management, about label deals, and so it was a profession, and it was a profession you pursued like that. And there are people that are still doing that, but the bulk of musicians I see out there now are not on that kind of path. They're sort of on a me path, and it's interesting. I don't see it leading to. I've discussed this on my Threads page. I don't see it leading to sustainable careers. I know different musicians taking different paths, and the ones that are getting success are the ones that are still focused on label manager publishing. And it's real interesting. It's hard to relate the path that I was on. I got to New York City as a 16-year-old, and I was there, as a 16-year-old. And at that point, I had a Martin, and I was pursuing the folk scene in Greenwich Village. And I was there about 30 seconds before I realized I did not have a voice that would propel me to stardom. And yet, being a side person also was not a choice, and playing guitar for somebody, so not a choice for me personally. And so I quickly got into a scene that prepared me to be a record producer, and that was brand new back then. A&R people were just leaving the labels and becoming record producers, signing artists. And I fell into that scene through a guy named David Peel in New York City. And so that set me on a different path. I ultimately came back and did artistic stuff and still do artistic stuff. But my career was a record producer.
Okay, and were you producing for a specific label, or was that kind of a label you were trying to start? Give me some information about that.
Yeah, well, at first it was me as a in my own with partner and raising money, and we had control of a recording studio. Now this wasn't a recording studio that you rented studio time in. This was a recording studio. We were focused in Nashville. And this was a recording studio that you made records in. You didn't rent out. It was ours as record producers. And so anyway, we were focused, and our label deal was with Monument. We had a major label deal, and so we released three singles and an album for Monument, uh, and had a single on the charts for 9 weeks, and that whole thing, and that really, that was I was still very young. That would have been I left New York in 19 I got to New York in 1970, and I left New York in 75, and for a couple of years dealt with things back at home in Kansas City, where I had a recording studio and was signing artists and producing records, and really finding my legs as a record producer. And then we signed some publishing deals, and we signed an artist to Monument Records, an artist named Gary Apple. We signed him to Monument Records, and had a couple of a minor hit, and got some Billboard play, and from there, I moved on. And at that point decided, the punk rock scene was vibrant. And so we're talking about the late '60s. Our record on Monument, late '70s. Our record on Monument came out in '78 and hit the charts in '78, and so the punk scene was just electric. Oh my God, it was just so compelling. And so artistically, as a producer, I was working completely in pop, but artistically, I really wanted to do punk, and so I went that way. I My next project was my debut album, and which was on an indie label. There was a huge, vibrant indie punk scene through those days, all centered out of record stores. It was just you sold. It was different. It was all about selling records, right? Record labels were manufacturers, and so there was this, as a punk artist, as it was all about vinyl, and so there was this huge scene of record stores, nationwide and worldwide, that you released records through, and you toured, and so that was the end of the '70s for me, and so we can explore that a bit if you like, how, working at a major label level. My co-producer on the record at Monument was Fred Foster, the Hall of Fame producer, Country Music Hall of Fame producer. And, Monument at that time was Roy Orbison and Larry Gatlin and the Gatlin brothers, and Boots Randolph and Charlie McCoy, and uh, uh, oh God, I can't remember.
Well, I'll probably have you share a couple memories of those, but I want to give time for everything since then as well. So let's kind of move forward a bit, and what were kind of the next steps after that? Once you eventually left the label, how did you continue to participate in music?
Okay, well, I carried on with all that until 1983, and then by then I was married and had a wife. I turned 30 in 1983, and so my career went from 14-year-old to 30-year-old. And when I turned 30, I changed. I left the music business, and mainly to raise a family. Disco had really killed the ability to break rock acts, and had sort of changed things in a very negative way for rock radio. And it was just a different time. And so I changed careers at that point, and started college as a 30-year-old freshman, went straight through, got a PhD in physics, did 20 years as a scientist, as a theoretical physicist in industry, doing all kinds of different wonderful things. But then, but that was always a lark for me. Music was my career, right? Music was my profession. So as soon as my youngest daughter was old enough to move out, and I left that and came back to music full time. So that's when I was 55, and so we can sort of carve out the niche between when I turned 30 and when I turned 55 in those intervening years as a scientist, I still played and had fun, but I didn't gig or do anything. I was deadly serious about that career while it was happening.
That's very impressive that you know left the music industry to become a scientist. That's not so common from like a majority of the people that I've talked to. Not unheard of, but it's impressive.
Well, the shock value was great. You have to remember, I'm a punk rocker. I'm still a punk rocker.
Right.
And oddly enough, there are lots of PhDs in rock music, probably 30 or 40 of them in known bands. And most of those are people from punk bands. Um, just,
Yeah, I
just an
absolutely believe
aside.
that.
But so I came back at 55. I came back to the music business. Um, I bought Pro Tools, and I learned Pro Tools. Uh, not not for the faint of heart. Uh, and I took a year to get my legs under me as a producer, and then I founded a record label, Russian Winter Records, and which is no longer, that has morphed into a new label, Buffalo Burger Records. But I founded that label and started signing artists and started releasing indie music into there was a vibrant indie market, which still exists, right? Indie radio and it was the same scene. And it's interesting. um, you talk about trying to tell your listeners things that are really valuable that you learn. One of the things I've learned is the idea of what a hit is. As a producer, you're always looking for hits, but people that don't have success use hit in a pejorative way. And every form of music, every genre of music, whether it's classical, bluegrass, indie, death metal, death, 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 death metal, um, choir music, it doesn't matter what kind of music it is, there is some definition of what a hit is for that genre. And so, as producers, that's you and as artists, that's what you really are looking for, right? Is understanding what that sweet spot is, where you can artistically fulfill your desires, but at the same time be able to meld those desires with the commercial necessities of whatever the market is for the type of music you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that you started a second label, started releasing independent music. What you're talking about, searching for hits as a producer, is absolutely relatable. I think that's kind of what everybody's kind of hoping for with the whole viral marketing type thing. So, where does that kind of bring you up to, kind of in their interim? What are you working on now?
Oh, all kinds of cool stuff. So I started a music blog, got fairly big from 2011 to 2019. Florsheim Zipper Boots. We published reviews of indie artists every day. I started recording as an artist between um, 2008 and present. I have released 11 EPs and albums and 5 singles. Those all came to streaming for the first time in 2023. And so from the second week in January, every 2 weeks, either one of my albums, EPs, or singles have been released. And so, so I have a huge catalog of work now, that spans genres. I've been genre hopping through it. I had a chance to have a semi almost hit in Chill Wave during its 15 minutes there in the 2010s. I shared a manager with Youth Lagoon and Neon Indian and a publicist, and then they found out I was 59 years old, and that career came screechy. I didn't let anybody see my face. I got a Decoder magazine and Decoder blog premiere, and they wanted a picture for the cover. And I sent them a picture with a Rickenbacker 330 taken outside in car headlights, so they couldn't see my face and see how old I was.
You should have done what the people are doing nowadays and just like worn a mask.
Yeah, oh yeah, hilarious. And let me tell you about my most recent stuff. I've been doing. I'm getting back in. I'm getting into pop very much, and I'm 2024 is going to be about pop music. It's going to be about a lot of post punk music. It's going to be about a lot of swing, a lot of jazz and swing. And in January, I want to tell you about one record I released that you can find anywhere called "Leave Well Enough Alone," and it's a great swing number with a really terrific group of musicians on it. I wrote it, I sing it, I play guitar, I was the producer. Jack White's bass player, Dominic John Davis, does upright on it. Ronnie Millsap's great band leader, who you can see online at Millsap's big Brickstone concert he just did, John Heinrich, plays everything in it that has air going through it. And there are going to be two versions of this record. The one out now is just a combo, and so John is doing sax and trumpet. John's with Ronnie Millsap's band. I don't know if I said that, but on the other version, it's a full big band, and John is playing trombones and flute and trumpets and sax, and it's fantastic. It's going to come out next year with the swing stuff I'm doing. And if you're into the voice, it's one of the background vocalists was Kay Cosentino, who was a season 23 contestant on The Voice, fabulous artist. And piano is Roger Pitts, who's a Kennedy Center teaching artist.
Okay, so once all that stuff comes out, where can people find that, and then also follow you generally on social media?
You can find me on Spotify everywhere, and everything is out. The combo version of that record is out. The big band version comes out this next year. But all my catalog is on Spotify, Apple, Deezer, Teaser, everywhere you can imagine. Even on Peloton, you can find my stuff. Let's see, Ric, RIC underscore Gordon, Gordon. You can find me on Instagram. I would love for you and your listeners to give me a follow, and you can keep up on my career. I still perform quite a lot out, there, and follow me on Threads. I talk about the challenges of being a 70-year-old artist producer. I also feature a lot of new music on through my stories. I do a feature that's called "My Favorite Artists in the Ether," and that's a running feature that features different artists, and you'll find just some great people there.
Awesome, perfect. I'll definitely make sure all that stuff gets linked as well so people can find it. So I always like to give the person I'm interviewing the opportunity to put out their last word. So what's a message that you believe in that you think other people should hear?
Follow your dreams. But my first commandment of the music business is thou shalt not bullshit thyself. If you're going to go for a career in the arts anywhere, you have to realize that it's a bunch of brilliant overachievers, and that writing a great song or making a great record is not an end goal. That is the price of admission. And so, you really gotta give it your all. and don't be afraid to. You know, I've been around. I've had interns and friends, and I mean, if you really go out and it's your dream, and you don't allow yourself a plan B, you will achieve what you need to achieve to survive.